give people a few minutes to join. We're going live, so
if you want to send me a link, I'll share it on Twitter, or I'll just get it off of YouTube.
Yeah. One moment, I'll get it for you. But yeah, let's see. Copy.
Or if you just tweet it out, I'll just retweet it, and we can do it like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Yeah, man. Pete Quinones was like, "You got to talk to this guy." So I was like, "All right, if Pete says so, I gotta see what he has to say."
Yeah, I mean, you came very highly recommended by Jose Gallison, and
Jose is the man.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. And he apparently had such a big opinion about you. I hadn't really been familiar with you, but I had seen this guy's got excellent memes, and I'm like, okay, he must have a wonderful sense of humor as someone I'm going to get along with. So
nice, good.
Second, live. Sal, put the link right there. Predating on the State with Sal the Agorist. On the State with at Sal Mayweather. There he is. And tweet. No spelling errors. Good. Oh God! Do you ever get really self-conscious about I'm about to tweet something out and it's going to get retweeted and I know it and it's going to have a spelling error somewhere? It's just
no, I've learned that lesson. I've learned that lesson now. I like triple proofread them at this point, and they still slip through. So
yeah,
can't win them all.
Mm-hmm.
Can't win them all. I see some people in the community have spelling errors more than others. I take note of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and let me put this right here. Okay, perfect. Because now I can look straight at you. I finally fixed my. I got a new microphone I figured out how to fix it up, but I had to get a new camera to do it. And now I have like a 4-screen setup that's like really high.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I used to be just on my laptop because I was like looking straight at me, but the microphone just for whatever reason never wanted to work with the laptop. So I put it into a desktop, got a camera. Now it works, and I had to move the screens all down. But like yesterday, I had to look up at Peter and Matt the whole time. So now I got the camera right in front of you.
Setup.
Yeah,
that's so you have a whole studio then.
Oh yeah, basically, yeah. I
nice,
do. It's just software development, and as a day job, and I like to sit back.
Oh, perfect.
So
that's perfect for you.
I don't kill my spine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, that's a good job for someone with libertarian leanings.
Yeah, you get that mindset just goes right along with it.
There's a lot of opportunity there. You know how they say just learn to code? Well, you already know how to do it, so you're 5 steps ahead.
Yeah, man. That was like the whole reason I thought I should go into this thing. I had a talent for it, and I'm like, oh, this is I could tell one way that this market's not looking good. Like back in 09, 010 when I was thinking what do I want to do with my life? I'm in high school. What do I want to do? And I saw the way this is going. If you don't have some sort of resiliency and times of recession, you're fucked.
For sure.
I never wanted to. My parents were in that situation. Never wanted to be in it again. I'm like, okay, I need to be something that's going to be resilient against any sort of financial downturn or something like that.
And it's easier said than done too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think there was there's a scene from The Sopranos that I like where they're like Tony's mad at all of his underlings. They're not bringing in enough money, and he says, "Sil, break it down for him." And Sil's like, the only 2 things that really make money in a recession are show business and this thing. And he's talking about black and gray markets. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I've always said agorism is sort of recession proof in that sense.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's actually anti-fragile in that sense, because what do people want when they're out of a job and they're having trouble? It's it's the sorts of products that you find on the black market.
Right, exactly.
So it's actually anti-fragile.
Yeah. We're always I don't know. We always have some sort of like you said, resiliency.
Yeah.
There's always demand for a better way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think we'll definitely have a lot to agree on tonight. I'm a GOP guy, by the way, but if I wasn't, I would be an agorist. Like next.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so it's like,
maybe we can convince you.
well, it's like I think we definitely agree the LP is not the right. It's not the right way.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
definitely wrong.
Okay, okay.
But no,
Yeah, yeah.
this did you get a chance to listen to my podcast with Jose Gallison on archetropism?
I listened to a good chunk of it. I didn't get a chance to finish it.
Yeah.
I'm a little, I still a little fuzzy on the details. You're gonna have to break it down for me and stuff like that. So, there were some things you said that I had reservations about, but I don't want to agree or disagree before I know more. You know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is the framework itself is basically Rothbard in his in a Man Economy in the State, he talked about like the state from a free market perspective of why this thing should not be here, why it's bad for the market, why it's bad for productivity, all that. But he didn't actually get into here's the actual incentives of the state and like why it exists in the first place. He kind of just like barbarian tribes sometime long ago, and had low time preference and decided they can just extract a little bit at a time rather than barbarically slay everybody. And he just like hand waved it away. That part was in Anatomy of the State, but in Man Economy in the State, he never really got into the incentives of it. I'm like, okay, come on, this is like you would think know thy enemy, and I did a 4-part series on anatomy, the Art of War by Sun Tzu, and we just I did a live reading. Yeah, amazing. I've read it like 24 times. It's like every time you read it, it's like something new pops out. You're like, that's a really good way of putting that. And anyway, but so Rothbard, he never really got into like the incentives of the state and how this whole thing works, because if you look at like people like, oh, the states are like also hypocritical in their decisions. Like, no, they're very consistently going for their own incentives. Like, they're very, very consistent. If you understand what their incentives are, they're very consistent about pursuing them. Like, ridiculously so, even to like they'll lie, cheat, steal, do whatever, kill people, but they'll go for the incentive no matter what. And
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
we've seen that. Yeah, they're willing to commit genocide. They don't care.
Absolutely. It's like if they think they can get a bump in the polls somehow, they'll absolutely drop bombs anywhere. And
they've done it before. They'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no disagreement there. That's for sure.
But yeah, and but the whole point of the archetropism ring was to start trying to here's the actual economic incentives of this and why it works differently than the market and why this thing exists in the first place. And because I figure if you're going to end up beating the enemy, you really should know how he's thinking, why he's thinking. Because I made a point the other day that like consistency means you're predictable. That like if you're very consistent in your principles, and if your only principle is getting more power, and you're consistent to that, well, then I can predict what you're going to do, and I know what you're going to do before you do it. And so that's that's where we're going with this. And from these incentives, I've said, okay, there's at least 2 ways to deal with this. One is to actually seek the power and try to spread it out, because that's something they really don't like. Or you could take it the agorist route, which is actually creating new power that is outside of their control. And this I figure this the discussion we'll end up getting into. But
this is we'll have an interesting discussion for sure.
Yeah, like where are all the people? Yeah, I usually have a little bit more than this. It's only 3.
I gotta sign in and watch on YouTube myself. I can put this on Facebook as well.
Yeah, what the heck? 1 second.
Are you on Instagram at all?
No, I don't use it. Just like posting pictures of my wife. That's bad. She decided she was getting addicted and wanted to delete hers, but so now she just uses mine to post all the pictures. So. You married? You know how that is?
No. I'm not married. God bless you, though.
All right. Yeah. But yeah, one second, where it is. Let me put this out to a few places. Spread the link. Yes, Predating against the state.
I'm going to put this in a Signal Boost chat that I'm in.
Yeah. About to do the same thing with the Praxians.
Cool.
Alrighty, I think we're about good to go. One sec, I got one more. There we are. Here we go. Alrighty. All right, let's just go ahead get going.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome, Sal. Nice to meet you.
You as well. Thank you for having me, of course.
Yeah, and so I don't actually. I have to confess, I don't know too much about you, but I've seen you all over Twitter, and you got, like I said before, you got the most hilarious memes. So
I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, like I know, just short introduction?
Yeah. Sal Mayweather. You guys probably know me as Sal the Agorist. I'm on all of your different social media platforms as such. Longtime libertarian, long journey, eventually settled on agorism. And so now I run a company called Agoristics. We sell 3D printers, we sell clothing, all sorts of stuff, all geared towards the Agorist community and stuff like that. I host the Agora podcast, co-host on Loose the Goose. I run the New Libertarian blog. Recently, shameless plug, I recently did this. You guys can check that out, Anti-Politics.
Tell me about that.
This is actually about libertarian strategy.
Okay, I like that.
It's actually like a sort of a breakdown of our strategy. There you go. Yeah. That's more of like a war book. This is more of like an anti-war book, I would say.
The anti-war edition.
Yeah. It's like a collection of essays and articles they're inconsistent with agorism and stuff like that, trying to expound the agorist message. So
how would you I have a basic understanding of agorism, that you're basically trying to create wealth as far away from the state as possible, be it black market or gray market, preferably, but the further away the better. Black market here doesn't necessarily mean like you're committing crimes. It just means it's away from the state. That's how I understand that. It's like, I might be, selling some loosey-goosey cigarettes or something like that. It's not like, so not like the sort of thing people would be really afraid of, but the more like it's actually creating regular value that is removed from them. That's how I understand that. How would you define that?
I define agorism as, the definition I'm using now, at least, is I think the best way to understand it is that it's a unique form of entrepreneurship. Whereas most entrepreneurs focus on profit seeking, we focus on profit seeking and disruption. That's like my quick definition. I mean, it is black and gray market transactions, but it's all voluntary and peaceful transactions.
Yes, exactly.
So there's no coercive transactions. That's really the main difference.
Is that what people call the red market? Yeah, where it's like coercive stuff.
Yes. There's the red market and the pink market, which are sort of like the black and gray. One is, war and evil and stuff like that. I think that's the one where, at least based on my limited understanding, not to jump the shark here, but on archotropism, I think when we were talking about power brokering, my initial conception was that, he's talking about a red market transaction. That's what's going on here.
Similar to that, yeah. But my idea with archotropism is again to define what their incentives are and what will actually work in producing liberty, either personal or collective, and those are two different processes. I think agorism, as particularly as you've defined it, where you are creating wealth through peaceful means. Peaceful always creates wealth. Unpeaceful means always consume it. And
right, exactly.
Because you disincentivize further production. And
bingo.
And so I always I liken this to thermodynamics because it struck me how similar that these work, even though it's all based on economics and praxeology. It still came it still like just had such a resemblance to just thermodynamics. I have a bit of a science background too, but the and that was what kind of cued me, because I had the first two, back in like 2017. Dave kind of gave me the third one when he introduced me to Hoppe, because that was about time preference, for power, or that the value of power is subjective, is subject to people's opinions and whims and time preference, most importantly. But then it's like when I started to see that one, I'm like, oh, and that cued me in that, oh, okay, so these are actually all based on thermodynamics. So I started looking up thermodynamics laws. And I got the other three, and I see that now. But like like this first law, I think this I'll try to run through these pretty quickly. First law is like, hey, I call it the conservation of power. Is that the is actually the conservation of the value of power, but I still call it conservation of power. But the idea that, hey, because this act of aggression has value, it's going to get done, because humans are very consistent with their incentives. And as we've seen in the past year, it takes a hell of a lot of propaganda to move them off of their incentives. We saw the biggest propaganda campaign in human history to get the vaccine, and people are like, no, this doesn't look good for me, I'm not going to do it. And now they're like, okay, we'll have to like take away your other jobs and stuff like that. Yeah. And they're making like the single biggest push to get people to behave against their incentives, and they don't want to do it. And they're still kind of losing. So that's how powerful incentives are, and people will always behave their incentives very consistently. So if people are incentivized, because this act of aggression has value, that means it's going. That's what means it's going to get done. So, but what happens is, okay, its value is relative, not absolute, because like you have something that's like a peacefully made, like an iPhone. This has intrinsic value. Even though its value is still subjective, it still has intrinsic value. Whereas that like my act of aggression against like you is relative to like your ability to defend yourself against me. So it's like my power is relative to your power, and the value of that is basically all relative. This is why it always this, when we have something like a state, why does it always form a monopoly? It's because if you're like working against each other, that has a lot less value. For working together, that actually has a lot more value for both sides. And this is why you see the state, like a state which is just a hierarchy for aggression, will consolidate itself into a monopoly, just because that's what's valuable. And and anything that's worth doing is worth putting a hierarchy on top of, because hierarchies make things much more efficient. So in this case, that's a bad thing. Normally we just put a corporation on top of a value processee or private business or something like that, and we say that's the guy in charge, and he's the one organizing the means of production, and that's what makes that production process efficient. Well, unfortunately, the same thing works with the state, where the predation process is now being made a lot more efficient, and we prefer that wasn't the case. But as I think you've mentioned, like if you're selling 3D printers for guns and you're trying to use counter economics to try to get away, to undermine that's actually making their value of predation, that relative value is now a whole lot less valuable. And you're actually, because you're bringing the prop. Okay, so remember that Mises and Rothbard both agreed that any action that has value, it gets done until diminishing returns that makes that marginal profit equal to the marginal cost. So that's profit maximum right there. So where you're, any extra units of production are actually, losing you money instead of gaining you money. So that's where you profit maximum is. Well, the same thing applies to the state. However, the size of the state is going to be proportional to, well, where is the maximum production? Where is that maximum value? That's where it gets done to.
Right. I see what you're saying. Right.
And so if you're using counter economics to make their things inefficient, well, you just brought the profit maximum down. You shrunk the size of the state just like that.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, I understand where you're going. It makes sense. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with anything that you said. I'm kind of
Yeah,
on board so far.
yeah. I don't
Like I
think
said, I'm still skeptical. I'm like walking
you feel like I'm going to
on
trick you into
eggshells.
something.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm seeing where
No,
this is going. I'm
he's
trying
got
to
the
see the logical implications before we get there.
yeah. Andrew's got those eyes. That's like, oh, he's thinking he's about to trick me
Yeah,
into something, and I see it.
yeah, yes.
No, man. I ain't gonna trick you today. I'm
Okay,
always going to try to lead you to where you can probably see where we're going.
okay,
Like
I got
so,
you.
it's like it's going to be pretty quick. But the point of like this is that actually, there are two main solutions that come out of the archotropism, understanding the value of power, understanding why this thing works the way it does. There's two that come out of it. One is like your idea of agorism, counter economics, peaceful state removed transactions. I hate saying black market because I just feel like that's just because you're doing it away from the state, why is that a crime? I just hate calling it that. But yeah, I understand.
I sort of revel in it in the label at this point, because I think a transaction that occurs, an untaxed, unregulated transaction, is a much more noble transaction than a taxed and regulated transaction. So I take pride in it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I worry about the risk cost. Yeah, that's right. That's why I say it's peaceful, or peaceful state removed, and
Yeah, voluntary. That's all.
yeah, exactly. If you're doing things like these, well, what you're actually doing is we go into the second law of archotropism, where basically the power seeks consolidation from low concentration to high concentration, and the predation is defined as the consolidation of power. So let me say that again without the pauses, because I had to remember it. I had a brain fart for a second. The power seeks consolidation from low concentration to high concentration, and and predation is defined as the consolidation of power. So this, and by the way, I took this one straight from the left, because that was who I had to really look at to figure this out, because it struck me that there are tens of millions of lefties out there, and they're all seeing the same thing about this strange zero-sum fallacy, and which really seems like a fallacy to us, but in fact it's not, as we just explained with the first law. Because if the value of power is all zero sum, that's where they're getting it from. Is that they're actually seeing the power value of wealth, rather than we are seeing the economic value of wealth, which is positive sum. Economic value is positive sum, where there's more for all, growing pie, yada yada yada. For them, because of the second law right here, when you're creating new wealth, you're creating new power, and that's unconsolidated power. To them, production is predation. That's like, from their point of view, it's fucked up the way they view it. But from their point of view, and this is why a state will choose an income tax, which is a production tax, over like a consumption tax, because this is they're actually worried about the production itself, not the consumption, because the production is predation from their point of view. And go ahead.
I was going to say the only I agree with you. I agree with everything you said. The only point of caution I would say is that we started by saying how thermodynamics, the laws of thermodynamics and stuff like that. And it's funny you say that, because I look at agorism very similarly. And one of the laws of thermodynamics that I really love is the whole idea of entropy, and the idea that systems tend towards disorder and towards chaos. And I've always looked at agorism kind of just like that. And I've always felt like naturally the market will sort of decentralize itself. And I hope it's not sort of running contrary to your idea of power consolidating. I've always felt like economic power sort of decentralizes in an entropic manner.
Yes, it does. And we get into that with the fifth law of archotropism, which is actually the second law of thermodynamics.
Okay, I don't mean to jump the shark here.
No, you're totally fine. No, but I like the way you're thinking about this, because that's absolutely correct. Is that these, Rothbard actually pointed this out, that, production actually has to precede predation, because otherwise there's nothing to predate upon.
Right.
It's kind of just logical that way. But
yes, of course.
But these two have to be, diametrically opposed. These are opposing forces. And because it's like, I literally, for my act to have value, I have to take something from you, or control you in some way that has a value to me. And so yeah, but with the second law of where was I going with that second law? Low concentration, high concentration. Basically, that's the strong prey upon the weak. Shocker. And but with a low concentration of power means you're a pitiful piece of shit, and they're stronger. It means they're just going to take what's yours. And this is the robber, the mugger on the street. He doesn't go try to predate upon the cop. It's like he's looking for the old grandma with the it's like with arthritis. Like that's the mark. It's not going for the cop, not because the cop would kick his ass.
Absolutely. This is the problem with gun-free zones.
Mm-hmm. And exactly. It's like you're literally creating a target where there's free of power, so extraordinary low concentration of power, and so you just made that a target. And
exactly. And this is a lot of that is the reason why criminals will target people who are victims of public policing and these socialized policing. So it makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm. And actually, as it's funny you mentioned, because this is actually where you see like both who gets the worst of both the police and the criminals is like poor people. Why? Because they can't fight back. They don't have the means to really do that.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. They're what's the poor person? It's a low concentration of power. It's like they're not going to go after like the rich bastards. I mean, maybe if they're like a really high functioning criminal or something like that, or just
right. And the whole point of agorism and counter economic entrepreneurship is to sort of raise that individual up so that they can actually they do stand a chance in that sort of face off.
Mm-hmm. And because of that, the anytime you're creating new value, it's like the state will see you as a threat to them, because you have just created new power. This is why they care so much about inequality, is that but like it's a power imbalance. It's like they feel like they're down here, or really, I'm off camera. They feel like they're way down here, and that you're now way up here, and that you could come and get them. And that's where they get that from. That where they're not worried about poverty. Obviously, they're worried about inequality because they're seeing the value of power, not the value of economics. This is why they're so economically illiterate. But they're really good at gaining power. It's because these are two opposite systems. And this is why I say, okay, if you're on the really far left, because they really understand power, because they have such a love for it. They really love power. Or if you're on the, like I consider libertarian to be on the far right because they have very, very little understanding of power. They're really good at saying, bad, production good, state bad. They're really good at saying the bad part and identifying the enemy.
When it's convenient.
Exactly. And, but like with like Rothbard and Mises, they never talked about why this thing works the way it does. And this is again what I'm trying to get into. But the second law, it's all based on economics, because remember law of returns, or I should actually say the law of demand. It works both. Both are true actually. But the Mises would talk about that. Hey, you would he derived the law of demand is like, well, you do the most important activities first, and those are your highest value, and then you go down the value hierarchy. And well, same thing was like, who's the best kind of target? It's like you basically, do you play poker?
No, not anymore.
Poker? Okay.
Yes, used to.
But you're an agorist, so you should be familiar with the expected value formula for. Actually, I thought Konkin talked about that, where it was like the chance of risk multiplied. Chance of profit multiplied by money of profit versus cost of.
Yes. I didn't know there was a name for it.
Yeah, it's called expected value. Use it in poker a lot, and to judge whether is this a good winning hand that I should play with, or based on the pot, how much money do I stand to win? What am I risking if I lose? And what are my chances of winning with this hand? And it's like you can mathematically do that and determine if it's a mathematically good bet to take. And
same thing with a counter economic transaction.
And so basically, if you understand, like, okay, what's my my expected value, that's going to be the order priority in terms of predation. So you're going to go after the poor people and the blacks and the people who really don't have the systemic ability to fight back. They're the people who are going to get like the worst of the worst, and that's just because they're the easy marks and they're the lowest risk marks. And at the higher end of the spectrum is going to be like your Bezoses and your Bill Gates, and actually they're probably going to be the ones doing the predation. So
right.
And it's like you don't go. And again, it's like the cops are up there too. You're not going to go try to rob a cop. It's just no. You're an idiot if you do. So that's the basically because of this that's where you get that consolidation from low to high, is that that's the mark. They're the ones who are going to get consolidated upwards.
I got you. Okay, I understand where you're going with that. Now I got you.
It's all based on economics, but this is second law is actually strange because it actually works exactly the opposite, where like heat tends to disperse from high concentration to low, and electricity does the same thing, where energy moves from high concentration to low. But you can think of it as, okay, well, I mean, the high concentration is attacking the low, but the actual value, the actual power that's moving, or the value that's moving, is actually going from low concentration to highs. And because this is a economic framework more than it's a thermodynamics framework, I went with the opposite.
Right.
It works a little bit the opposite way, but that was the understanding that this thing's based on thermodynamics initially cued me into that this is where I should be looking.
Right. No, I got you. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. It makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm. And the
intuitive.
Yeah, this is where this third law is where we might actually get a little bit. This is where like disagreements might start. But this is from the third law. This is one that I got from Dave because he actually started talking about Hoppe one time. Because I was basically temperamentally libertarian and basically had like all of the same basic libertarian beliefs for most of my life. I don't know. I was just a natural libertarian. Father was a boomer con, but it's like the Rush Limbaugh kind of boomer con, where where it's like, okay, constitutional conservative rather than okay, we're just progressives driving the speed limit, and it's like the good kind of conservative, good, better.
We all have those in our family.
Yeah, and and he's pretty temperamentally libertarian too, but I guess it runs in the family anyway. But so that was like my basic background. I got to it's like I invented like the archetypal thing basically in the same year that I found Dave Smith, from when he had his he had a interview with Reason magazine. I really loved Andrew Heaton because he was a hilarious comedian too, and libertarian comic. I'm like, oh, a new libertarian comic, and started listening to Dave. Oh, he's making some great sense about this whole Ancapistan thing and economics and all that. I'm a nerd. I enjoy that, but I think he's got this one thing wrong about the value of power, because I had the first two laws and I didn't really hadn't really quite connected them to thermodynamics yet. But when I saw that okay, because I didn't quite understand why value changed hands at some points, because you would see things like Colorado, when they would actually like legalize weed or something like that, or these other states that legalize weed. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, and shouldn't they always want to continue consolidating power, and
that was us. That was the Agorist. yeah. Well, that not to interrupt, but that's one of the arguments I give to the LP types. It's like, Gary Johnson didn't do that. It was massive waves of non-compliance that did that. But they have a hard time understanding that.
We're about to disagree there. But
okay.
We're about to disagree right there. But,
okay.
But the basically a third law is that the value of power is not only relative, it's also subjective. Which, shocker, all value is subjective. So that
I'll disagree with that.
Holds true for that too. But unfortunately, that also means it's subject to time preference, meaning that I could defer gratification on predation, or I can have a lot more right now. Do I want to eat the one marshmallow right now or the two later? And same thing is like, do I want to predate now or do I want to predate later when you're a little bit more valuable? That's it, because taxpayers are they're appreciating assets, if you think of them that way from the state's fucked up point of view.
Right.
But but what actually happened right there in Colorado was that they were facing a $10 billion deficit, which for them, when they're spending income is $40 billion and they're spending $50 billion, because this is the heart of the Great Recession, like 2013. well, that's a 25% deficit, and they're like, oh shit, we're going to go bankrupt if we keep this up. Let's legalize weed and put a 25% sales tax on that, which boosted revenue $9 billion and cut their deficit by 98%. And so that was, in fact, what happened was they were like basically facing bankruptcy. This is a better argument for accelerationism, is that because they were in such a financially insolvent position, they were forced to sell us back our liberty. That was what happened. They sold it to us, for a extra tax hike. But now it's like, well, if you're not paying that tax, I'm sure you don't have to. I'm not Fed posting here, so you don't have to admit to anything. You get the idea that basically they assume because of the honor system that most people are going to just follow the honor system and pay the tax, and it's actually a fairly good assumption. $9 billion is not small, but that was what that was. And if you look at all of the other places that they either legalized, they legalized it, like Detroit, California, Oregon, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. These were all places that were having real bad financial troubles, right around that same time, and really needed a cut in their deficit from a excuse for a tax hike, because this was also at the same time where the Republicans, we had just had a Tea Party wave that had still taken effect, and they're like, hey, we need to cut some spending. And they kept spending the same as well in Colorado for $50 billion for 3 years afterwards. And because the Republicans held it down, and they were able to cut the prison budget up by good. We shouldn't be spending money on putting people in cages. I'm sure the Republicans were thrilled about that.
I mean, that's what I was just going to say. Like, even in the case that legalization was deficit driven, that's still sort of an instance of agorism, in the sense that, hey, look, the state can pay billions of dollars to lock people up for victimless crimes, or look at all the money that these black market dealers are making. Maybe we can take a slice of that pie. So even in that case, it's still a good instance of the power of using the counter economy.
Yeah, it's that, hey, you could have a piece if you just legalized it, and you're letting by having this high time. I call that the predation upon that, the prohibition, a high time preference for power, because you're actually squandering wealth. Remember that predation squanders wealth. Go ahead.
Well, that would be the one sort of, again, another point of caution is that I would say we have to be careful not to assign traits or characteristics that are normally reserved for individuals to the state. So I think things like time preference or value creation are usually things that only individuals can do. So we can those concepts, I think, should apply to political figures, leaders, quote unquote leaders, things like that, parasites. But I'm not sure that they would apply to collectives like.
Well, all collectives are made of humans. So.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's how individuals formulate decisions. I don't know. I'm not sure if I would use those characteristics to describe a collective entity. You might be right. I'm not entirely sure.
Let me give you a second example. I mean,
please.
I'm sure you're not big on paying taxes anyway. But when they actually say, "Hey, we're going to cut taxes so we can grow the economy and and get more revenue later," it's like they're basically telling you you're taking a low time preference on taxation to make more later. I mean, it's like that's
true. Yeah, true. But I mean, how often do you hear them say this though?
It's like often enough, once a decade or so, and when they need it, but you will see stuff like this where they will actually be willing to sell you some liberty so they can get something on the back end.
Well, that's what a license is, right? A license is just them selling you your rights back that they've stolen from you.
Yes, that's exactly what that is. And and you can say, okay, this is a way that they're going to try to get something of more value later. And where they're going to take a little bit less now because you have a lot less transactions, but they're going to make that back in the transaction fees later, or something like that.
And I think that a lot of sort of right wing. I don't even like to use these terms right and left anymore because they're so jumbled up. But a lot of Republican politicians, I would say, are more inclined to do that. I think some of these left wing politicians are so completely economically illiterate that now they're using this new MMT theory where they don't even understand that there's actually this whole concept of like delaying consumption for, you know, later on. I think that some of these people think they could just print at will at this point.
Well, that's
like the
why
Squad and AOC and all these lunatics.
That's why I define, you know, these political ideologies by their time preference for power, because you can tell which ones are which by that. Where your really far lefties are like, no, we need to squander all human wealth right now. And
true. And there's also different types of power, right? So there's like political power, which I think, you know, is illegitimate and power in the red market. But there's also like economic power, which is a legitimate form of power, and I think a righteous and a good form of power.
Yeah, but yeah, when I say like their time preference for power, I'm usually talking about the coercive kind, the one we don't like. And
fair enough.
I do make a distinction between potential power and kinetic power. Kinetic being the the barrel of a gun, so to speak, and that's
or a candidate standing for office.
Yeah. Anything that's that's coercive by nature is kinetic, and maybe
potentially coercive.
Yeah, and then I say potential is but it has an ability to be converted into.
This is sort of how I look at LP candidates. This is why the people in the Libertarian Party don't like me, because I sort of look at them as like they have sort of a kinetic power in the way that you're describing, the same way that a bullet does, right?
I always say that they're like, we're gonna be politicians but bad at it. It's like, like no, it's like, why are they going to vote for you then? It's like we already established like 2 laws ago that they have a preference for this whole. They want this whole aggression thing, and they're looking for to apply that to them.
This is why, like, when there was this whole discrepancy versus like agorism and the Mises caucus and like paleo-libertarianism, like using the Republican Party, I would tell people like, obviously I believe in agorism, but if I had to pick between the two, I'm going with the paleo-libertarian strategy and like the Tho Bishops and the Ron Pauls of the world, because at least they're trying to win. At least they're being honest. At least they're trying to win, and they're trying to effectuate some positive change this way. Whereas the Libertarian Party is just it's just a complete circus.
I mean, with their idea of, we need to spread the message and, wake people up. It's like, okay, well, we've already established that people don't care about ideas. And by the way, if you've ever campaigned before, I assume you haven't, but I have. If you ever
I have.
Oh, really?
I learned this the hard way. Yeah.
Yeah. People don't care about ideology at all. It's like the common person doesn't give a shit, and they just have no capacity for it. They understand their incentives very well, though, and so
that's true. Fair enough. Yeah.
So when you're taking this approach of let's spread the message, it's like and spread these ideas and ideologies. Because ideas have power, and it's like it's like people don't care about ideas, and because you're ignoring their incentives and you're basically arguing with their ideas, it's like you're arguing with the horse's ass instead of the horse's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Actually, I'm going to use that from now on.
Absolutely.
I call them educationalists, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to masquerade the Libertarian Party as some sort of educational institution. It's like, go start a school or something.
Yeah.
If that's what you're trying to do, go do something like that.
Or like the Mises Institute. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But notice how, like, if you actually are trying to educate somebody, you don't do that by having a political party, right? See, the Libertarian Party is stuck in this inherent contradiction of like, we deny the legitimacy of power, but we also we want you to come vote for us. And by the way, can you donate some money while you're at it? Yeah. So like there's this inevitable like
also we're not going to win.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, we have no chance.
Waste your time.
No chance of winning.
Yeah.
And like honestly, like not to get too deep into the subject, but there's 2 arguments Agorists make against the LP, and one of them is the lack of pragmatism, right? Like the best any candidate for the LP ever did was Gary Johnson, and he got like 3% of the vote and wanted to force people to bake wedding cakes and stuff like that. So he's not even really my version of libertarian, and the best he could do against, regardless of your opinions of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, they were at the time wildly unpopular candidates. So if the best you could do under those circumstances is 3%, why should we think that you have any chance to have any success whatsoever at this point?
Yeah, I mean it's a first past the post system. It's like the whoever gets the most wins. Doesn't matter if you don't have a majority. And by the way, not having a majority is how you get the Lincolns and the Hitlers and the Wilsons.
Well,
That's so.
another way I like to look at it, and like we're talking about, like we're relating this to economic concepts, is like, Rothbard spoke about compulsory cartelization and how like different industry leaders will get together and they'll agree, well, rather than compete, well, let's all work together and we'll agree upon like one set rate or one set price. And as long as we all stick to that, we'll be good. But Rothbard said eventually one person will step in and sort of break this cartel up. And I think what they do in order to stop that is they maintain the cartel in a compulsory fashion. So if anybody steps out of line, they get the gun. And I think that's exactly what's happening with political power. Right? We're talking about power brokering here, and that's exactly what's happening. If we look at like the FEC, for example, they've cartelized the red market, right? They've cartelized the market for power. Because now it's like you either have to be a Republican or a Democrat, or you're not allowed to engage in these transactions. And look what happens. As soon as Gary Johnson hit those polling thresholds, those polling requirements, they just raised the requirements up a little bit higher for him. So it's exactly as you say.
I mean, when the I don't know if you saw this, but when the there were a few LP idiots in my Twitter feed a while back that were like, we need to run some candidates against DeSantis. We don't feel like he's a good enough libertarian. I'm like, dude, his opponent Nikki Fried wants to kill people. It's like, like not him. And by the way, if you do, I'm because I would love to, I think lobbying is actually the other strategy that comes out of archotropism, because you're just buying the power from them. If the power's for sale, it's like, all right, well, what's the price? Let's just negotiate here. I'm happy to go, write the bill, and lobby every single person in Tallahassee to raise those ballot access requirements. I will happily raise the LP's ballot access requirements if they decide that they are going to misuse their liberty, so to speak, to run a candidate against DeSantis.
And that's the whole other part of it. It's like, who are these candidates more likely to draw from, the right or the left?
Exactly.
Right. They're not going to take votes from Nikki Fried or Nikki Fried or whatever that lunatic's name is.
Yeah.
They're going to try to they're going to be drawing votes from DeSantis. And what's that? Is that going to create more or less liberty?
Less.
I, as an agorist, of course, I'm opposed to the whole political everything. I don't believe in voting or elections or any of that shit. But like I said, excuse me, if it comes down to it, I would have to go with.
I mean, you're an agorist because you're an agorist because you understand strategy, not for a lack of understanding of it.
Right, exactly. And honestly, I relate a lot of it back to like science and thermodynamics and physics. I really think it's sort of one.
And basically, but like with the with the LP is like again, like you said, they're only going to draw from the right because the right is the low time preference for power. They want to because they want hierarchy. Basically, if you remember that, if you think of left as equality and right as hierarchy, and libertarian as voluntary. Well, think of that in terms of time preference for power and what that does to the economy. If you're very high time preference for power, that hierarchy that you have of the economy is going to get smaller and smaller, and you're going to get closer and closer to equality. If you're a low time preference for power, it's going to grow and grow and grow, get more hierarchy. And if you're all the way to the right at zero, that's where voluntary is.
Well, here I'm gonna have to push back a little bit on this one, because as an agorist, we're not very keen on the whole concept of hierarchy, and it's not that we think it's immoral. Because that's not the case. Voluntary hierarchies are natural; they're going to exist. A lot of people don't understand this about agorism. This is very one of the most misunderstood aspects of agorism is the views on hierarchy. So we're not opposed to voluntary hierarchy. It's going to happen. It's going to exist in an open market. But we believe that, Per Island has this whole concept of the unrealized, right? This whole idea of like, if we let's look at consider all of the possibilities, all of the things that regulations are preventing from taking to fruition. We think that in a truly free society, in the Agora, there will be so many more opportunities available to the individual that things will be actually less hierarchical than they are today. There's going to be less corporate structure. There's going to be a lot less of that. There'll be more entrepreneurial opportunities, more ability for people to sort of strike out on their own.
Okay, so you're arguing because it's going to spread out and decentralize due to the cost structure, basically.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
if you just think of like
It's
the way a city works, which is architecture, it's a much more expensive to build up than it is to build out. So cities will try to expand outward until they reach geographic boundaries, and at which point, okay, well now we have to build up because that's what's cost effective. And if you're if you're artificially messing with that with like zoning laws or something like that, that's something that will get you to do the inefficient thing of building upwards faster, than instead of expanding outwards.
Yeah,
And
imagine how much more opportunity
Mhm.
there will be, how much more economic opportunity there will be in the absence of all of these regulations. Like you just named zoning laws, and we can
Yeah.
all imagine how much more
Mhm.
opportunity that would create if we got that
Absolutely.
nightmare taken care of.
Exactly. And this is why I say, hey, if you have voluntary, actually, because if you think about, well, okay, you were expanding out. What are you expanding into? Well, okay, nothing. There was nothingness that you were expanding into. That's equality. And basically, you create actually by expanding outward, you created hierarchy. You actually increased the amount of hierarchy that existed, and it was a lot easier and cheaper, more cost effective to do so because it was a voluntary nature. And but that's where I might push back. As this is just a definitional thing that we're
True.
disagreeing on. But I think if you're having like again, if like a voluntary society, you're going to have quite a lot of hierarchy because of the expansion outward. It's going to be expanding into what was formerly there was nothing there before, and now there is. So that's where and you only get the ridiculous massive skyscrapers when there's like a geographic boundary of a natural boundary, or you get stupid zoning laws, and it's more of
True.
the latter than the former.
The other point I would make here too is that in a proper understanding of class theory, sort of there's a binary sort of class division in society, I think, and it's sort of we can divide it between the plundered class and the plunderers. And I think if we sort of like the parasites versus the hosts, and I think that sort of is the real hierarchy. That's the one that we need to be concerned about. And I think by eliminating the political class, things will become more sort of even spread. There will be less of that sort of parasitical hierarchy and much more of like a sort of voluntary. If there are the hierarchies that remain will be voluntary, which will be, obviously less draconian in their imposition.
And that's that's where I think where I say, okay, the GOP can be useful to that end, because if you think of the if you're wanting to basically get rid of them, or if you want to buy your liberty back through basically through lobbying, and really, who would you rather have on the other side of the table? A really high time preference leftist who is like, there's no price that's tastes as sweet to me as power, or would you rather have like a Republican? It's like, I don't really know, I don't really care, maybe this is good for the free market, and it's like I prefer to have the Republican on the other side of the table, because they're easier to negotiate with. And if I'm going to be buying my liberty, if my liberty is for sale, well, okay, let's I want the other guy to be a little less greedy.
I see, I got you.
And but from where I stand, it's like, okay, who gets their way all the time? Lobbyists. Who gets their way basically none of the time? Activists. It's like,
of course, yeah.
Who have I seen plenty of interviews with? Activists. Who have I seen basically no interviews with? Lobbyists.
Yeah, right, because they're trying to hide their faces, right?
Exactly. So I see that as those are like the main two, because what you're actually doing when you're lobbying is you're giving them the value of power in the from the future in the present. Basically, is because my future value of predation over your liberties, is being given to me now in the present. I'm willing to relinquish my claim on it in the future in order to get like, I'd rather not defer gratification, but I'm only deferring gratification because I understand how this whole market thing works, and I need to have a low time preference for it. This is kind of like what Rothbard did talk about, as he described the right wing version of predation, which is we're going to wait a little while, whereas he did he neglected to describe the Genghis Khan version of predation, where we're going to kill everybody and take your stuff. That was the Genghis Khan version of hordes and barbarians, but that didn't, anyway, but you had that with Genghis, and then Kubla learned a lesson later that, oh, but let's just like rule over them. That's nicer. And anyway, but the if I'm going to be on the other side, if my liberty's for sale, I'm willing to make the trade.
I don't okay, so I don't disagree with your characterization of lobbying. That's exactly how it is. So you put it perfectly. I'm not sure that that's a viable path to liberty for the following reason. I'm not interested in negotiating with these people.
Yeah.
I have no interest in discussing my freedom. It's not up for discussion with these people. I'm taking it. And if they have a problem with it, I use operational security to prevent that from happening. So things like privacy, secure computing, encrypted communications, cryptographic transactions, stuff like that. Don't tell them the whole plan.
Don't tell them the whole plan.
Well, no, that's just a basic rundown of operational security. So I think that is like, so there's like, the way we look at it is there's like sovereign citizens who are sort of like the heroes, right? Those are the real heroes. Let's be honest, because these people are willing to sacrifice their life right now, today, for their freedom. And I think as Agorists, we're like, yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. But we're not trying to die on the next YouTube video. Yeah. So we're going to operate in the shadows. We're going to be the gray man. We're going to blend in. And I think, to me, that that's a much more preferable option than it is to go sit at the political table where you sort of like, please, Mr. McConnell, please, don't shoot me for having my gun. Like, please, like, let me like do X, Y, and Z, and please don't murder me for not wanting to give you my paycheck. So
that's value subjective. Yep, value is subjective. Exactly.
yeah.
And so but yeah, that's exactly why I say there's at least two options that come out, because some people they only want a small amount of it, or they only want a particular kind or something like that. They're not looking to take the whole pie for themselves or something like that. And agorists are a more, how would I say, principled, or not principled, but yes, but like, that's not the word I'm going for. They're like they're less willing to negotiate. There's like, my freedoms are not up for a discussion, much less a vote.
Right. Exactly.
And it's like, I'm going to take this thing right now and, go fuck yourself. And
exactly.
I'll take the risk. And you're a lot more, there we go. You're less risk averse, which is, funny. It's a funny way to put it, because you're not like the sovereign citizen, which is like, I'm ready for a fight. It's like, we're going to stay in the shadows, which is risk aversion. But as opposed to like someone like me, who's like, I know I'm one of the 140 million suckers who pays my taxes. And because it's like, I say it that way because I know that this is the honor system. And, and unfortunately I have this crappy amount of honor that I can't get rid of.
Me too. I pay my taxes
exactly.
too.
Bingo. And that's exactly right. So yeah, but this is like where you get the this idea that where I say, okay, if you're going to have a GOP strategy, it needs to be kind of geared towards lobbying on the back end, because it's who I want the other, guy on the table to be, preferably a libertarian who's like, yes, we should absolutely cut everything. It's like, I want that guy on the other side of the table. But
of course,
that's obviously an ideal, and I can deal with the, just the regular Limbaugh constitutional conservative. That's preferable. The leftist on the other side of the table is like, they're going to exact one hell of a price, like a 25% tax or something like that. And but
the sad thing is that it wasn't always like that. Like, it used to be the case that I don't want to say we had agreements with the left, but like on things like war, they weren't terrible on, and there were certain things that they weren't god awful on. Whereas now today they have just become so dictatorially communist that there is just no room for agreement. I should probably roll that back, because Ron Wyden, the Democrat from Oregon, was pretty, him and Rand Paul were the only ones who were actually opposed to that NSA bill. He's like one of these more progressive Democrats in the Senate. He just did something else that was not terrible either, that I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe you. And I usually point out that because of our if you assume that everyone's kind of on a bell curve of time preference for power, most people are going to huddle towards the middle. And that middle is going to be kind of a relative moving thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's why you get so many like kind of more moderates in the center, because that's what's electable. And if you think of what it takes to be an elite, because remember, libertarians on really far to the right on this spectrum, right, it's a time preference for power. So they're to the right of the right in terms of time preference for power, and the left is at the really, really high. Both the commies and the libertarians are both very unelectable, and that the main reason is because they can't see how the other side works.
See, like, do you think that leftists are? See, I'm sort of torn.
I think they're consistent with their incentives.
Are they low time preference, or are they just dumb?
No,
like, which one is it?
Dumb.
I think it's sort of.
I'll tell you why. I can prove it. Because let me. Okay, so basically they've been forced to wait this long. Basically, in a democracy, it's always it always favors the person who's willing to promise more for less. The guy who's willing to lie. The guy who has a higher time preference for power. You add that up and compound that over time. This is why republics always end in disaster and civil war and strife. And it's like if you look at like our Constitution, which was like 2/3 monarchy, because the founding fathers, God bless them, they understood that, okay, we can't do this whole pure republic thing. This is going to be a disaster because you're literally incentivizing people to go rob each other, which is exactly what happened in the Articles of Confederation.
Pure democracy, you meant.
Oh no, I meant republics. Same thing happens in republics, because all you're doing is outsourcing the predation to experts.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah. But if you look at what happened with Shays Rebellion,
when you combine it with democracy, not to interrupt, when you combine it with democracy, it's even more shitty. But yeah.
Oh yeah, it's even worse. And like Greece and Athens, they had a democracy for like a pure democracy for like a little over 100 years, and they were at war for 77 of those. So
and they murdered all of their smartest citizens.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's like Socrates got put to death for that. And it's like saying, hey, this thing doesn't work because the people are uneducated doofuses. Which
is ironic as we sit here and Julian Assange and Ross Ulbricht are either exiled or in prison, and Satoshi Nakamoto's hiding, and all of our smartest citizens are going through the same sort of thing. Isn't that ironic?
Pretty much, because it's we just went to the Roman Republic, which had 26 civil wars in its first 230 years. We got away with one, thankfully, because
one big one, and it wasn't a civil war. It was more of like a
war of
war of aggression. Yeah,
northern aggression.
Yes,
but the reason we only got away with one was because our founding fathers were smart enough to make our Constitution 2/3 monarchy. Monarchy tends to be a lot less prone to civil war, and basically what they did was they installed an artificially high price floor on the interest rate of power. If you think of your time preference as your consumption, as your rate of consumption, and okay, well, what happens when you put think of it like an interest rate? Well, what happens if you have an artificially too high price floor on that? You're going to get a crap load of savings, and eventually the state's going to manage to usurp all of that. Eventually it will usurp its bonds. It will usurp the Constitution.
True. Yeah,
it will break
absolutely.
the price floor, and then you have all of that power right there, just ready for the taking. And then you convert that from potential power into kinetic. That's a war. And so
right, exactly, or from kinetic to from potential to kinetic. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's sort of ingrained into the Constitution when they say you have to use silver and gold coin or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So that you're absolutely right. There was sort of this initial accumulation of capital that the state eventually leached off of, and they used it to genocide everybody later on.
And this is why for the you had like a Bill of Rights that they had to usurp too, and you were only able to do excise taxes or tariffs initially, and you were able to build up whatever you wanted in the middle, and there was no income tax, no real excise tax is kind of our consumption taxes, but not quite. They're different. They're not like a sales tax, but eventually you get to the point with the excuse me. Yeah. indigestion. That you get to the point where in the extra I'm sorry, progressive era, there we go, where that basically after, because
it gets even worse, right?
Well, yeah, well, John Wilkes, I think Lincoln would have destroyed everything, if we had if he had been able to live, hadn't slipped in the shower and fallen on a bullet. But
yeah. Well, that was his whole plan. Mm-hmm. That was his whole plan. He wanted to deport the slaves to British Honduras or Africa or something like that. And obviously that would have collapsed the entire Southern economy. And I think he probably would have been a lot worse if Lincoln remained in office rather than Andrew Johnson.
Mm-hmm. But because of that, because he got the bullet to the brain, basically the price will actually got put back in a freaky way, where you didn't really have that much like true predation like for the next 80-ish years until you got to the progressive era, where they're like, all right, now we have a real accumulation of power. It's time for World War I. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, because you had in Europe, it's like right away when you had the French revolution, it's like, all right, we're a republic now. We killed the king. We're a republic now. It's time for some Napoleonic Wars. 5 of them. Right off the bat. It's like they immediately went to, and then unfortunately they went to war with like Germany, and like they're like 5 nations, and eventually that all consolidated everybody into Germany, because they were like different states before that. And so now
I was just going to say it's sort of if you think about it, at that same time in history, they were consolidating American states. Lincoln was consolidating American states, and Bismarck was consolidating German states, and it sort of falls in line with your thinking of like power consolidating.
Pretty much. And the French helped them out because of the wars. They had to consolidate because Napoleon wants to invade them and eventually invade Russia in the winter, which is a terrible idea. But eventually you get to like World War I, where it's like, we're going to make the world safe for democracy, which is kind of an oxymoron because democracy is not at all safe.
Right.
It's really a contradiction in terms there. It's like, okay, time for because when democracy emerged in Europe, it's the unrestrained version. Remember, our founders at least had the sense to say, okay, we're not doing the whole republic thing, because that's going to turn out like Rome with 26 civil wars. By the way, 26 is just the civil wars, doesn't count the external wars, which is
true,
horrifying. But but when you had a democracy emerge en masse in Europe, that basically you had, you immediately get fascism and communism and all the great isms of the 20th century. And, it immediately starts off at World War I. So, it's like democracy is here. We're ready to start mass murdering people because that's what democracy does. And, and this is their time preference for power, because this is, they want to consume it right now. It always favors more consumption. And when you're, collapsing the hierarchy into equality, what ends up happening is that scarcity increases, and now you're going to be pushing the people to where they have to use power in order to survive, so to speak.
I think in a more sort of acute sense, I think that the whole passage of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 really helps artificially induce a high time preference on the entire Western world, and that's as Ron Paul says, it's no coincidence that the century of central banking coincided with the century of warfare. So
that's exactly what happened.
Makes sense, yeah.
And you can see this in their, in the federal spending per person, because you can't like tell what the GDP was back then. So what you do is you use the per people instead, the spending per capita. And for like, first 100 years, it's basically flat. There's a little bit of a blip around the Civil War, and it stays flat. And then, you get the Federal Reserve, and that like takes off almost vertically. And, and then you can see that's predation right there. You can see it. And you can see it in the numbers that there actually was a price floor on the interest rate of power, and it held firm, and it didn't actually increase very much. And then it did.
Right, exactly. And that's sort of what agorism is, right? Agorism is sort of about like, hey, look at this shit show that's going on. Here are some solutions to fixing this problem, right? And like, this is why I tell people to become their own banks, because you sort of sidestep all of these sort of the political predation that you're talking about, and you just get right to the solution. You just clear the table of all the bullshit and the nonsense, and you just deal with just, becoming self-sufficient or I
right
guess it's
away.
not a good term. Yeah. I don't
I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm not denying the division of labor or anything like that. Sometimes
Exactly.
people confuse self-sufficiency with denial of the division of labor, which is not the case.
Not the case. No, not the case at all. But yeah, so when you start getting into like this, I feel like this is the third law is by far the most important because it tells you everything about what the state prefers, and it's like that, and then of course you get like World War II, and that screws everything up even worse. And if you're gonna have one World War, why not have two?
Yeah, right.
Why not two? It's like
finish the job.
And yeah, exactly. We didn't get enough. We didn't get it out of our system. And then America's like, oh, okay. We decided, okay, after a second one, we just dropped nukes, and we don't want to do that again. How about we're going to try something new? Because okay. Back up, rewind to World War I. One of the major things that led into that was that they, when it was like the ending of the age of empires, where you had like Portugal and Spain and and France and Britain. They all had empires everywhere and crisscrossing trade routes. Now, if you're a state and you're naturally paranoid about people are going to take your stuff, what would happen is that you would have your own supply line and was guarded by your navy, and that navy has to sail by all of your friends who hate you, and all of the friends who hate you are not friends, but all of the neighbors who hate you and are naturally suspicious of big warships passing on their coastlines. They're going to be very, very apprehensive about that, to say the very least. And so what happened a lot was piracy, and this is why we got piracy all throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, was that you had that ship is under another legal system that isn't mine, and I can predate against it with no real consequences as long as I can get away with it. And so you would basically have her Queen's Navy unofficially is like ransacking Spanish galleons and stuff like that. And this lack of free trade was what one of the things that ended up leading to World War I. And in World War II, we decided, okay, we're going to try something different this time, where America's going to patrol the whole world with our Navy, and we're going to have we're getting into the fourth law now. We're going to try we're going to try this whole new thing called free trade, where our Navy is the only one that survived the war because all of the rest are in Davy Jones' locker. And this is at the end of World War II. And so, we're looking across Europe, and we see Stalin's Red Army just literally get done, raping and pillaging their way across Germany. And we're like, oh, hell no, we don't want to do this, because we were gearing up for war with the Soviets now. So we're like, all right, so we're going to do this thing called free trade now. It's like, just bear with me. I know you guys have done the opposite for centuries, but just leave with us. We're going to take all of our allies together. We're going to put them and take them to a nice golf resort. And you do the thing you do when you get to a nice golf resort, is throw everybody in a dark room, lock the doors, and nobody gets out until we have a deal. And this was Bretton Woods, where we said, okay, we're going to, now we're going to be patrolling the ocean with our Navy. Everyone gets to, send their trade ships out to collect whatever, raw commodity they want, bring it home, metabolize it into a finished good, and then export it on the international market for a hard currency. And that was the basics of Bretton Woods. And there was just one catch: you have to be on our side against the Soviets, and we get to write your foreign policy as it regards to them. That's the catch. And also we need you. I know you guys just got done shooting at each other, but we need you to stand in front, not in line with us, not behind us, but in front of us, in between us and the Soviets. So deal? They're like, no, the Soviets are like really, really terrifying. We're going to need a little bit more. And so we had the Marshall Plan too, as an extra bribe to sweeten the deal. And so we're going to give you all the loans or whatever to rebuild your economies, and give you like a really ridiculously low interest rate and a long term. And we're going to give you basically a military subsidy that's what our $1 trillion a year of spending is. It's a subsidy. We're subsidizing free trade for everyone else, because if we were to leave it to them naturally, these bastards would have their own navies and be shooting at each other, because we tried that. And I know it's fucked up, and like you see it and you're just like, God damn it, you guys ruin everything. It's like there's nothing good that you guys aren't going to ruin. And so basically, we gave him this bribe, and eventually, in the definition of pent up demand, the Germans have a party, and in the late 80s, and then the Berlin Wall falls, and 1992, the Soviet Union goes bankrupt because communism doesn't work. And so we're at this point in time, it's like, okay, 30 years later, we're like, so why are we doing this Bretton Woods thing? And it's like, I don't really like all these infinite wars, because basically that was one of the things, is we can't deny war anymore, because we said we would go to war for anybody, for any reason, at any time. And the credibility of the alliance is at stake if we deny war, because we said we would, and we're willing to bleed even when it's politically unfavorable to us at home, and it's dividing our country and spending a shit ton of money. And so this is why we've had endless wars for 80 years now. And so now we've gotten to the point where Americans are really fed up with the whole endless wars, free trade, and what was the other one? Oh, and the soft currency, the hard currency, so to speak. All of these problems have completely come to a head, and we're like, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're electing Trump, because he's going to basically, he was elected to just destroy the Bretton Woods system, and ended free trade. So we're not doing that anymore. And it's like we have like trade deals. I think it's like 5 countries now. It's like South Korea, Japan. Gonna have one with Great Britain. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. And then Mexico and Canada. That's it. That's the only 5 we care about. And everyone else can go pound sand. And they can start. Germany can go start remilitarizing again. China is going to have some trouble because they're surrounded by enemies who hate them for 1,000 years. And and again, it's like they get to they have to get like 90-something% of their oil from the Persian Gulf, which is located a convenient 6,000 miles away.
Right, yeah.
sail past like Taiwan and Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, India, and all the other Pacific, those first island chain that really hates them. They have to sail all of their ships right past that, and
through the Strait of Malacca, controlled
exactly.
by U.S. warships and stuff like that.
And so they're looking at this like, oh hell no, this is not going to looking good for us. So they're trying. So this is basically they're not going to be able to get oil. Now if
you've seen what they're trying to do now is they're actually. They've had kind of deal with the Pakistanis where they just build a road straight up through Pakistan until they get to China. So now they just cut out all that shipping route right around the U.S. warships. It's all gone away pretty soon.
And the risk of that is that all of that road has to go through one canyon, which is really, really, really easy for a Islamic extremist group to blow up for whatever reasons, something.
or one of some U.S. president's Predator drone or something like that.
Bingo. And so the India gets a little bit too pissed off at by the way, because India has a great trade relationship with the Saudis, and the Saudis their foreign policy is a little more primitive and barbaric to say the very least. And
ask Khashoggi.
Yeah, exactly. And so
pieces of them.
If India gets a little bit too pissed at the Chinese for any border disputes, they can always call up their good buddies, the Saudi Arabians, who have their foreign ambassadors called Al Qaeda to go blow up that one gorge, and there's no fixing it afterwards. Like this is the one gorge that goes from Pakistan to China. That's where all the oil has to go through, and if that gets blown up, there's no fixing it in the next few decades. Like it's that level of just not fixable. So this is where we get to the fourth law, which is it's power is equal to force over distance and time, because you can't be in 2 places at once, and you also can't be you have to be in 2 places at the same time. Can't be in 2 places at the same time, and you can't be basically like that. So basically, you have to be physically present to apply force. And this is like one of the best things about agorism is that you kind of recognize that they don't have the budget to enforce everywhere. This really is an honor system. So if they're not physically present to slap the handcuffs on your wrist for doing whatever you're doing,
I see what you're saying. Right.
they don't actually have power over you. They actually have to go the distance in order to apply the force. But what this means is that distance and time are costs. They're logistical costs to power. And this is how, where counter economics is brilliant, is that you're dramatically raising the distance and time costs in terms of, like with encryption, this really is just a time cost because it takes 1 trillion years to fucking break encryption.
Yeah.
And so this fourth law right here is where you're actually going to shine the most, because you recognize that like OSHA, like this new vaccine mandate, OSHA has like a $550 million budget and 2,000 agents and there are roughly 20,000 municipalities within the United States. And I'm thinking, if I could, so in other words, the number of municipalities, alone outnumbers them like 10 to 1. So, and most of those 2,000 agents that they have are not field agents. So actually, the number.
Well, it's sort of like we're talking a lot about like science and stuff, and we're like talk about space and time, right? Distance and time. That's exactly what we're talking about here. It's not just time, but it's also like, if you look at like a VPN, right? We're confusing our location or something like that. So it really is sort of exactly as you're saying. We sort of try to mix and combine the two.
And you also see this like in the physical plane too. Like, if why is it that, I don't know if you ever noticed that, where states actually draw their borders, it tends to be along geographic boundaries. The reason is it's usually difficult to project military force over those boundaries. Like if you look at the United States, we have basically impassable forests and tundras and Great Lakes to our north. That prevents Canada from invading, also prevents us from invading them. We have to go up the East Coast, and then across Appalachia, the Appalachian Mountains. By the way, mountains again, is like you can't drive the tank over a mountain; just doesn't work. And you have to go through a pass, and when you're in that narrow pass, it's like this is why 300 Spartans can hold off Xerxes' armies of tens of thousands at the Battle of Thermopylae. And
right.
If you understand that the reason this thing is, because the reason behind the fourth law is that basically some geographies actually have more value than others. And, Sun Tzu also says in The Art of War that, no nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare because it's fucking expensive. That's time. Time and logistics is always a cost to power. And but again, what we said with the first law, that by putting wherever the profit maximum is the size of the state. That's where it's going to get done to, because that's the incentive. Unfortunately, well, okay, if the profit is lower down here, that's a smaller state. And
true.
So,
I think you're absolutely right, and it does it. And really, what we're talking about now is geopolitics or political geography, and that definitely is one of the key influences in how states make decisions. And I did a whole series in my podcast about geopolitics, and it's very. I mean, the problem. My only trouble with geopolitics is that it explains too much. It's that you can use political geography to literally, and there are political geographers out there who use it exclusively to explain state behavior, and I think it's sort of deterministic. It's sort of deterministic in that sense, but it does it does make a hell of a lot of sense.
The way I say it is that it sets up the incentive, because you're adding the
exactly.
You
That's
have
a good
the
way of
revenue
putting
function,
it.
and you have the cost function. The question is, does revenue exceed cost? That's the main question, right, with geopolitics. And why I think they try to explain too much is that they're only looking at the costs, and they're not really looking at the other side of that. And they're also not understanding the third law, which is, okay, value is also subjective. So, that you can say that, okay, well, maybe it's worth the cost. Maybe I'm taking a loss right now, and in order to make it back at some point in the future, and instead of, and trying to make it back immediately. And maybe they're not looking for an instantaneous return on investment when they invade Taiwan. Maybe they're looking for it in 30 or 40 years or something like that. And long after, Americans have forgotten, because it takes us like 10 or 20 years to forget about Tiananmen Square, and really it was like really about 12. But by the time China really started to get private investment was like 2008 or 2009. You can see that in their GDP curves of all the money they're getting in from America mainly. It's because that was about how long it took. It took almost 20 years for us to forget about them massacring all those students, and because
I never forgot.
Yeah, we don't want to get Wall Street didn't want to invest in them. They didn't think they were stable enough. That memory is a little bit too fresh of the communist slaughter. Let's give it like 20 more years, and then and that's kind of what they're thinking right now. But if we invade Taiwan, it has to have like a 20-year or something like that, return on investment, and that's going to be that's going to be where I think the geopolitics guys who are trying to explain this they say war is probably not going to happen. That might be where they would get that wrong. Is it depends on actually China's time, the CCP's time horizon. What are they willing to? How long are they willing to wait to get a return on investment? And so the basically,
there's a lot of different theories on like what the correct geographic paradigm to look at world affairs through is, and one of them, I don't know if you're familiar with Harm de Blie. I think he's a Dutch he's a Dutch geographer. He's got a book called, I think it's like The Power of Place or something like that, and his whole theory is that he actually draws a line separating like the North and the South. All it goes like from between Cuba and the U.S. and through Mexico and Texas, and it goes all the way underneath Hawaii and like around China and Taiwan and through the Strait of Taiwan. And his point here is that at any point where that line is drawn and there's like a sort of meeting between two geographies, like between China and Taiwan, or between Mexico and the U.S., there's going to be this sort of tension between the third world and the first world. And we're going to try to find people from the third world getting into the first world and people from the first world sort of resisting that. And that's his whole theory. Not that that's good or bad, or I'm agreeing or disagreeing with it, but just that it sort of came to mind when you were discussing like all these different geographic theories.
Go over that one more time. So it's basically he's dividing the North and Southern Hemisphere.
Basically the Western and the East, basically the first and the third world, or the developed and the developing world, I guess would be a better way of putting it. And this line runs right through Cyprus. It runs through along the Palestinian border with Israel. Up the border of Europe and Russia, and so on and so forth. And there's plenty of other wonderful geographic theories out there. Anybody else is interested. Like I said, I did my first few podcast episodes were about that. Those episodes were terrible, but go ahead.
No, I'm guessing that's because of that. The geographic placement of the southern hemisphere is virtually all in the tropics. Like virtually none of it is temperate.
Well, and that's
you need temperate for the to have a real developed economy, because that's
absolutely.
where you get the winter kill for all the agriculture. Otherwise, you just have bugs and fungus and God knows what accumulating all year round. So
Nicholas Spikeman, the political geographer, said that history is made between 20 and 40 degrees latitude, north latitude. So I think he's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I haven't heard that before, but that sounds like about correct.
Again, these are very we're really painting the world with a very broad brush. So like there are exceptions to these rules, right? I'm not to say that there haven't been brilliant thinkers in other parts of the world or anything like that. Just that seems to be the trend.
You're just saying Canada's fucked. That's exactly right.
Right. It's too cold for me. Too cold.
Exactly. Me too.
Give me 2 minutes. Let me go run to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
Piss my pants. 1 second.
Right. I'm going to do some plugs and take some questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Be right back.
All right, now, y'all, if you are enjoying this, you should really consider Infinite CBD, or not Infinite CBD, Paloma Verde CBD. Carlos, don't hate me. I'm sorry, but Paloma Verde CBD. I had about 2 of these strawberry gummies before I came in here, and unfortunately, I again left them outside. That's twice in a row that. Your boy here is an idiot. And actually, let me just go grab him. All right, y'all. Forgive the unprofessionality of dropping out on you guys. I am back, and I would like to introduce you guys to Paloma Verde CBD. You can use promo code POPULAR. to get 25% off your order over $75 and free shipping. I use these all the time, basically 2 or 3 times a day. They help me relax and take the edge off right before I, get into a discussion with a new person. And these, my wife also likes to use these for recovering from her exercises. And Paloma Verde gonna throw hands, Andrew. I know. There's also I wanted to make sure you all knew that there were some other promo codes out there that actually they don't work. If you use other less efficient promo codes, they will, instead of sending you Paloma Verde CBD, which is very, very delicious, they will send you distilled Hillary Clinton urine. I have this on good authority from Carlos. If you use the wrong promo code, if you're not using promo code popular, you are risking having your gummies filled with Hillary Clinton urine instead of CBD. So you really don't want that. And you should always use promo code popular to have the to buy your CBD. And also, I was just telling everybody with Paloma Verde CBD, if you use the wrong promo code, for some of the other ones that are out there, those are all fake. They don't exist. They're not real. If you use them, they will, instead of sending you gummies with CBD, they will send you gummies that are infused with distilled Hillary Clinton urine. So you don't want that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I know. It's
like, no thanks.
You want the real thing. That's promo code popular for 25% off your total order and over $75 and free shipping. And I'm going to take a moment to add some questions I wanted to take from the part of the problem, or not the part of the problem, the Popular Liberty Inner Circle. That's my supporting listeners group. You can get in there for only $7, and their link is in the description to Subscribestar. I will take 2 questions, that were asked, by my supporting listeners, and one question was, I was hoping you could discuss more about your comments about wealth being potential power. Curtis Yarvin has said it is difficult to convert wealth into power, but easy to convert power into wealth. He's paraphrasing from his last podcast with Michael Mouse. Do you agree? I would say, disagree. But I think what you're getting at, though, is that there is something of a coefficient or almost like a transaction fee. There is an inefficiency there where, basically the more money you're putting in, the easier it is to convert that to power. Whereas the less money you're putting in, you don't really get much bang for that buck. So if you're a kind of a small dollar donor, you're not really going to get any power for that. And you do, there is something of a threshold you do have to meet before you can really start applying that. Now that does vary depending on how you're using it. If you're using it to buy ads like the LP, as they want to raise $100,000 to have some bullshit national ad that's going to do nothing. And even for the guys who are like, oh, we're going to be spreading the message, they're spreading the wrong message with that ad too. If you look at their description, they're like, oh, we're going to talk about how bad these vaccine mandates are, and then we're going to link it to bodily autonomy. And I'm like, it's like, fuck, man, that's like the wrong message. Just stick with don't mention we're the principled ones who are principled on bodily autonomy, and all of the other. The other 2 political parties don't give a shit about it. No shit, they don't give a shit. It's like the standard operating procedure for them. And so
this is what the LP does. This is what they do. They waste money and resources, and they're very good at it.
Exactly. So if you're trying to spend any money at all on the LP, I guarantee you it's a waste of $1. And if you're trying to spend it lobbying through the GOP, well, I mean, you're going to, maybe you have to get together with a few of your buddies and hire a lobbyist who is well connected and can make the proper argument to the state about how they're actually going to get more power by giving you their liberty right now. That's the argument you have to make to them. And again, that's all determined by their preference for power. And so, yes, there is an inefficiency here because you don't quite know which one's which. You might get the more establishment Republican who's kind of a jackass. He's just a progressive driving the speed limit. Or you might actually get like a real guy and they're like, DeSantis, who's like, he seems to be the real thing, and he might actually be willing to sell you a little bit more of your liberty at a more objective and fair price. And so, but because you don't really always know which ones are which, you have to, there's going to be an inefficiency there. So there is a little bit of a difficulty in transforming, money into political power, going from political power back to wealth. That you do see that in career politicians. It tends not to be the case, though. And what it really is if you have a good lobbyist and you're a corporation, then it's a lot easier to turn political power back into wealth. Because you put the guy in there, he owes you a few extra favors, and that's how you do that. But it tends to be a little bit more there is some reciprocality to it. And do you have a comment?
Yeah. Let me just jump in. I think I think there's different kinds of power. I think maybe like wealth or economic power might be one form of power, but I would say you're not going to create a free society like this. And I think this is one of the differences between agorism and Jason Stapleton's idea of wealth, power, and influence. And the example that I'd like to give people is look at Britney Spears, right? Super wealthy, extremely influential, powerless to stop the state from predating on her vis-a-vis whatever that relationship is that she had, the legal relationship with her father. Starts with a C. I'm drawing a blank now, but
something like that, where basically he basically had power of attorney over her.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, some glorified power of attorney. So yeah, my point is she was very wealthy, but she really didn't have too much freedom. So
yeah. And I think Yarvin is correct. There is an inefficiency there, but it's not like it's hard to go from one to the other. It's they're very doable, and it's done all the time. It just tends to be at a higher volume than most of us are really asking for. And and so you might have to be like a fishing or hunting license, concealed carry, marijuana. These are those are things where it took rather large lobbying efforts and some additional circumstances where they were in dire financial distress, where that's what it took to get that done. That basically you could look at that 25% tax rate as that basically it was a $9 billion bribe to the state to don't throw us in a cage for smoking a joint. And that's how you would look at that. And you would have to hire lobbyists to convince them of that kind of level of magnitude that they're going to need to receive power for that, in order to let them give you that sort of liberty. And so if you really want to get like a more private property society, like buy an island or something like that. That's the sort of thing that you're asking them for. And I don't know what that costs. Maybe it's like 10 years of taxes or something like that. But
let me just hop in there too, because just as agorists, this is something we're opposed to, this whole idea of anarcho-Zionism, the idea that we should sort of have this like Zion for libertarians, like the Free State Project or seasteading or private cities or like Galt's Gulch or any of these sort of things. And the reason why we're opposed to it is not because we think it's immoral. God bless them. I hope it does work, but it's from a strategic point of view. You're sort of concentrating yourself for the enemy. And it's this sort of strategy relies on, this is what Sam said. He said it relies on the moral restraint of politicians who've demonstrated time and time again that they have none. So I always try to shy people away from that. And the Free State guys, they don't appreciate that. But I do think that's correct.
Yeah. And basically if you're going to be buying an island from like, I don't know, maybe Nicaragua, which doesn't really have a navy, like that's the kind of people that, maybe that might work for, because again, they would have to build a navy to come get you and then, ship people across the sea. And that's going to be difficult and expensive for them. It might not be worth it. Again, see, the instance with China and Taiwan that, that could be very dangerous and risky to them. They probably don't want it. That's, It's like if they're going to do it, it takes a extremely long time horizon for that, for that to make sense for them. And they probably don't want to wait that long. So they'll probably just do other things. And that's the beauty of understanding incentives, is that you understand which ones get done first. And if your one is if like the incentive that is bad for you is so far down the list that it never ever happens, well, okay, that's the sort of thing that you would be protected from. I do want to take one more question because I know I can see you're about to, but
no, go do it.
There's one more question from an Arco Space Trucker. I realize it's very early on in the strategy's creation, but has there been any thought or discussion where a pilot program for these ideas might take place? He's referring to what I've termed as the GOP strategy, which is basically we're going to be taking over local governments and basically turning them into or government null zones effectively. And using a system I developed based on archotropism called the anti-tax, which is basically a sovereign wealth fund. I won't get into it too much here, but basically this is how we're going to create, get the state to abolish taxation, and think they got the better end of the deal.
No, I'm interested in hearing that.
Basically, I did the show with Pete Canones as based on the anti-tax, and I'm happy to have you back and have you to critique it from an agorist point of view. I understand that this is politics, and you're probably not going to be down with creating local sovereign wealth funds as a way of getting them to normally like in a Nordic social democracy, they use sovereign wealth funds, where it's Saudi Arabia too. They use these things to fund their welfare programs, but we're going to do the opposite and actually just use it to cut taxes. And it's doable at a local level because those politicians are controllable. Those elections are cheap. You can win them for a few $100 to a few thousand, depending on the size. And like my hometown, the mayor won his most recent election for $200, under $200. And so that it's like, and I'm sure he's an old guy who just cares about has some vague idea of doing the right thing. And he's like a far right Republican because, it's like the middle of Central Florida with everywhere there is really, really deep red, and they're all like Reagan conservatives. But this shouldn't be that the idea that, hey, we're going to, use the taxation we've already collected, because these guys have like millions of dollars in reserve funds, that just kind of sit there in the bank gathering inflation every year. And instead of just letting it gather inflation every year, we're going to, give it to a licensed, financial manager to earn a return on investment, and then just use that, whatever is beyond inflation, we just use that to, cut taxes for the people. And we can generate revenue that way with the taxes they've already collected. And there's no real way to give it back. We could be realistic about that. But at least, this way we could, not have to tax people every single freaking year in order to fund our local governments. And, eventually, with the way compounding interest works, we could probably get to a place where, as long as we're able to hold spending down, which should be able to do at a local level, again, that, because there's 20,000 of them, they're very competitive. And if they start getting, this is the main thing that keeps local governments from getting really, really terrible, particularly in the more rural regions, is that it's so easy to just pick up your business and go to the next one that's a few miles away. And, so if they get greedy, it's real easy to just, vote with your feet and get away from them. So if you look at like local governments and their tax rates, like where I am now in Texas, the tax rates don't really differ from, municipality to municipality, just because it's that competitive and it's so easy to leave. And, and spending, kind of stays down for the same reason, that there's actually competitive pressure there. That's why something like the anti-tax would work at a local level and be a disaster at the state and federal level, which I would never, ever try it there. But if I wanted to get the same effect from the state and federal level, I would just, try to lobby them to raise taxes on the anti-tax fund and, use that as a cut for the other property tax. And that would be the way I would try to sell that to them is, okay, I need you to raise my taxes. And it's like, okay, I'm sure they can handle that. And, or at least, tax me in this different way rather than that way. And I'm sure we can make up some bullshit about how the corporations want this. And, they'll be pleased to create jobs and, the whole thing they always say. And
that's the gist of it. And I just ran through something that was like a, almost 2-hour presentation. So I was like, forget, I understand if you're like, okay, this sounds, I don't know about this. I just ran through a 2-hour presentation, but the idea to answer the question of where, this strategy comes from, because basically where I was going is, I remember I told you, like, okay, we need to buy our freedom from them, and we're going to need to buy it from all the other people too, because the state exists because people kind of want it to. It's there for their predation as much as it is anybody else's, as it is for its own predation. And so therefore you need to not only bribe the politicians, you need to bribe the corporations, you need to bribe the people, and you need a mechanism that can do all three at once. That's the sort of thing that could actually buy you real private property. The reason we know that will work is this is how we actually got private property in the first place 600 years ago, after the Black Death killed off like half of Europe, raised all of the peasants' wages by like 500%, and therefore all the peasants were able to actually buy their freedom from the from the feudal lords and from the king. And this is what gave birth to private property, was that we just bought it from them. And it worked out.
Someone's been reading Hop.
Yep. And this is what gave us private property. And this is the same exact strategy that worked the first time, and it'll probably work the second time. And, I don't know if we'll be able to do like a full secession with it, or maybe we just like say, okay, this is an American territory now, not an American state or something like that. It's still American territory, but at least it's not subject to the income tax. Maybe there's a way to do that there, but the incentive is correct. Now we just need to start determining the price. So that would be my lobbying strategy: set the anti-tax up, hook it up to the state and federal levels, and then start negotiating price. That's all I need. That's all. And basically I would use the anti-tax fund as the bribe to do that. So my first, the obvious elephant in the room here is, where's the money coming from the sovereign wealth fund? You have to be getting it from somewhere. Yeah, basically the wealth fund already would come from like the reserves of the of these local governments. Usually they have about $1 million a year sitting in the bank.
This is coerced money, or this is voluntarily given?
Oh, totally coerced. Totally coerced.
Okay, yeah. I'm
already
opposed.
Yeah, basically
hard opposed.
Well, basically it's like it's already been collected. So it's like they already took it, and it's like right now it's just sitting there gathering inflation, and you can look at it on the state's balance sheets, or these local governments' balance sheets, year after year after year, kind of just sits there, and it might go a little bit up, it might go a little bit down, depending on how well the sales tax does that year, and but the money's already been taken. So at least like, could we please not just let it sit there accumulating inflation? Can we just like put it to actual work and maybe penalize us less? That's the so like if you just like take it as a given that they've already taken it, there's no giving it back. It's like, what can we at least put it to better work than what it is? And it's an efficiency argument that, okay, what can we and eventually down the road it's going to be let's how about when you're in financial distress, because we know there's a collapse coming eventually. How about we bail you out? We give you, the sum total of our sovereign wealth fund, because we don't want to be here anymore. A bunch of polls have already said we don't want to be here. Like 2/3 value, like 2/3 of, like the South, just like, we want to leave, just let us go. And they're like, no, we're going to shoot you if you try to leave. And so how about we take our fair share of the debt, and probably your fair share of the debt too. And, and we give you all our whole sovereign wealth fund, and you don't shoot at us while we leave. And is that a deal? And maybe not. But it's the incentive there is correct, that this is something they might go for if they're in really dire financial situation. And, that's the like kind of our best hope at this point. Otherwise, this thing's going to come down around us. And if you don't have your own, wealth, power, and influence, and self-sustainability, you're going to be fucked anyway. So, this is like your second best hope. And this is, something I would like to do with the GOP. And I'm sure you're like already against like the whole coercion part, but I understand that. And,
well, I mean, if we put aside the option that I'm not getting my money back, then I'm open to different ways. I'm open to the most efficient use of that money otherwise. rather than continuing to further my own oppression. So
Yeah, exactly.
obviously, I'd like my ideal solution there is all the money that's been stolen from me, I want it back. But if that's not going to happen, then I'm interested in looking at more efficient ways to use it than the ways that they're doing now. I'm not opposed to gradualism or incrementalism in practice. It's just that I would prefer,
go right to
know
the
what I
source.
mean? Right, exactly.
Control your own income, and control your own means, and use it, and basically take your real self-ownership all the way, and all the risks that come along with that. And,
but like I said, absent that, I am of course open to discussing the more efficient ways to use it, rather than giving it to buying Nancy Pelosi's next mansion or Chuck Schumer's next yacht. So.
Agreed. I'd much prefer that we use some money that's already been taken from, so just cut future money being taken from me. And that's the basic argument with that. And so he asked where I'm going to be doing these pilot ideas. It's going to be in the Texas and Florida are my main two, because I think those are two states that really will be a lot more open to the idea. And I've already had some people from Florida contact me saying, hey, I want to run. I want to help, shepherd this thing through and get it done. I have my own money, and can you, advise me, et cetera, et cetera. And the answer is always yes. So that's this is like the GOP strategy is, setting up for this eventual buyout, effectively. And that's the sort of thing that actually they've shown time and time again they're willing to go for that. And it's just a matter of price. So moving on, I think we were at the fourth law, and I think we had just covered how agorism solves this well through counter economics by raising that cost of the cost of predation, so to speak. And I think you mentioned this one earlier. Now we're moving to the fifth law, where let me just pull it up. I'm blanking again, but it's the one about entropy, and I'm kicking myself because I shouldn't know it. Fifth law. There we go. In a closed system, all power is subject to entropy, in parentheses, chaos, and tends toward decay. I should know that right off the top of my head, because that's like verbatim the second law of thermodynamics.
Right.
And they say the word energy in thermodynamics. I use the word power, but that's what we're talking about. And basically, this is why you can see this as if you understand that this thing is this power structure that's on top of the economy. This thing is very, very rigid. It doesn't change quickly, and what you see in history is often very like an overturning cycle of, strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and the bad times create the strong men. The reason you see something like this is this overturning order is it's made for one people at one point of view in one point in time right then. And and as time goes by, everything changes and incentives changes, and eventually this order that was created 80 years ago doesn't work for us anymore. Same thing like with the Bretton Woods order, it doesn't work for us anymore. It was made to fight the Soviets, and then the Soviets have been gone for 30 years, and yet here it is still, and Americans are kind of pissed and tired of it, and we don't want to do this thing anymore. We're the policemen for the world. We're done. And we want a new deal, where we get rid of that, get rid of the infinite wars, and get rid of the free trades, free for everyone else. It's heavily subsidized by our Navy, and we pay for that. We don't like that, and we prefer not to. And we want something new and different, and we're going to design a new order that's basically based for us right now, and that's going to work for a little while and do pretty well, and then it's going to get really old and tired, and someone will change it. Because again, it's like these power structures, they're not dynamic, they're not really sensitive to customer satisfaction the way like the economic market is. Like, you have to get it right now and at all points in the future. You're not like waiting 80 years to get a new thing. imagine if you had to like wait to get a new iPhone, at the end of your life, 80 years from now. It's like, no, that's the, it's like, if the operating system only got updated every 20 or 30 years, it's like, that's not something the economic system would do, but because the state is not, sensitive to customer satisfaction, so to speak, they will change it only when there's such an outcry or there's such a problem with it that, okay, fine, we'll change it all. And usually this happens through dictators, which we've had like 3 of so far, and we're looking to have a 4th. The first was like, Yarvin has talked about like the 5 republics, or that were the 4 republics we've had so far. What first was the Arcos Confederation. We swept that one under a rug because it didn't work. That only lasted like 12 years. And then we went to the Constitution, and that where we got our first real dictator, which was, George Washington. He could basically do anything, and good for him. He resigned after 2 terms. So at least he wasn't terrible. And then we had, 80 years later, we got Lincoln, and he was horrible and killed a whole lot of people. But he, he redefined federalism to be, oh no, you actually can't leave. No, we're not. It's like we said you could, but no. And we got rid of federalism. And then we got 80 years later, we get the progressive era when you have Woodrow Wilson and FDR, mainly FDR. He was the main dictator, where he gets elected, and he's like, if Congress doesn't give me what I want, I'm just going to take it, and you don't want that to happen. And he's like, well, okay, guess we better rubber stamp him. And that's exactly what happened. And that was basically what led us into the Bretton Woods order. He died before that, but his vice president, I forget his name, Truman. Yeah, gave us the Bretton Woods order that eventually has now decayed, and now the state is, the current regime is really, really scared, because this is the point in history where the dictator comes. And it's, we're due for a right-wing dictator after, this last progressive era has gone on way longer than it ever should have. And so when they see someone, like a Donald Trump guy come along, he's basically our equivalent of Julius Caesar, where Julius Caesar was like, independently wealthy, general. And he was he was a populist from the Party Populares, and and the people really, really loved him because he always loved to, give him free stuff. And so he comes in, and he's like, wants to basically overturn the system, and went to war with the basically the elites and won, and they're scared that, and he ended up getting betrayed by his own party and stabbed in the back. And same thing pretty much happened with Donald Trump, independently wealthy billionaire, has the love of the people. Like, there's nothing this guy can say that's going to make them leave him. And, he's, really fights their perceived enemies. By the way, Julius Caesar, his opponents were the optimates, that's like the progressives, they were the optimal people, the aristocratic elites, who was Donald Trump's opponent, the aristocratic elites, and the modern day progressives who think they're all the best. And, he comes in, surprises them in a surprise victory. Julius Caesar, he won, while being outnumbered like 4-1 against Pompey's army. And, it was that Pompey was the Hillary Clinton of the day, inevitable. And that didn't work out. And so now they're, he gets in 2020, he gets cheated basically and lose, and then his own party betrays him, along with all the judges that he put in who also betray him. Shocker. And now so basically he's the sort of guy they're really, really worried about. Like, he's the script goes like, that's the guy, but he wasn't the guy. And what we're really looking for is like a right-wing Augustus to come along and just tear away the whole system. Like the next guy, because of, and they just created it ironically. Remember, the definition of archotropism as actually that they try to extract order from chaos, and that's what gives them their power. The reasons that they're supplying things, that their main service of the state is to supply an aggressive order or orderly aggression to the people. And so when chaos breaks out, that means there's a shortage of that aggressive order, and that if you need to, if they want the order back, you're going to have to pay us in power. So that's how they power grab, is chaos, order, power. And that's the main definition of archetropism. The 6 laws are really how that ends up happening. That's the why and how. Archetropism is the what, the laws are the why and how. And so right now, they just, chaos outbroke because from their point of view, chaos broke out because Trump got elected. They needed to, really power grab and to restore order. The problem is they didn't do that. And, their chaos, their own fear in their mind, that's the chaos that's going to, pull the, that they've just created the incentive for a right-wing Augustus to come in and restore and be the one to restore order and power grab. And basically it's because they, and the way he's going to say it is because because look how they just fucked over Trump. We can't trust him. They all cheated, et cetera, et cetera. And because of this, this is why my mandate is to go to war with the bureaucracy and win. And that's the next right-wing president. He's going to be running on that because that's the incentive, or at least if he doesn't, he's ignoring the incentive, which is very uncharacteristic for these people. And it's really funny how that works out for them, because it's their chaos, the elite's chaos, that ends up making them lose their own powers. It's going to be a bitter irony for them, but this is why they freaked out about Trump, because they thought he was the guy. In reality, he wasn't, and their response to him was what created the chaos. Is going to end up making them lose their power, and they've ended up creating the thing that they fear. So that's
well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll definitely see. I think it makes sense, because one thing I've certainly been suspicious of is that if you notice over the last 20 or 30 years or so, right-wing presidents have become more extreme to the right, and left-wing presidents have become more extreme to the left. And it's almost like this pendulum is swinging, and it's getting, each swing gets more and more wild until eventually you're just going to be you're going to knock the whole clock over eventually. So. And I think it's more likely to happen with a right-wing politician than it is a left-wing politician, because the state isn't going to blame themselves.
Yeah. And right now you've got a weak guy in there, Biden, who, can't consolidate power because there's, he's not really there. And
he sure as shit is trying, though, with these vaccine mandates.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that power is unconsolidated, that's chaos. That demands order. And and then this Kamala, well, she's hated because she's a horrible person and she's a reptile in a skin suit. And so it's like, it's like the two most perfect opponents for a real right-wing guy to just run against the bureaucracy. Like, I'm their enemy, and it's like my mandate is to go to war with them and just to overturn the whole system. And this is where we actually get to the 6th law of archotropism, which you just mentioned with the pendulum, is that every overreaction of either the left or the right demands an equal and opposite overreaction. That's basically a 3rd law of thermodynamics, where every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And basically and you think of this way as like pent-up demand, because it's pent-up demand on both sides, because the left wants chaos, and when there's too much order, well, that's not enough chaos for them, and they turn reactionary and start really shoving it back to the right. When there's too much chaos coming from the left, which is what we have right now, well, okay, that's a shortage of order from the right's point of view, and they're going to start shoving back to the left, and they each do it an overreaction both times, because again, that's pent-up demand. It has an explosive characteristic to it, and unfortunately, sometimes that's literal. And you actually see that this is one that you see most scalably. Whereas if you if you have from the right, remember if the Constitution was a right-wing coup, that was trying to install like a 2/3 monarchy system. Well, that created a price floor. That was an overreaction from the right. It held the consumption of power down for a long, long time, and then it all exploded in World War I. When they finally managed to really usurp the whole price floor on power that they had made. That's my thesis for the 3rd law. I had a separate video on that, but basically they held it down, and then boom. And then if you look at Europe, which is like even worse, is that you had like 1,500 years of like Christian monarchy, Christianity being a very, very low time preference religion. Basically, store up all your treasures in heaven. And in practice, what that means is you either give them to your children by you don't live a hedonistic lifestyle and you save up your whole life. You give your wealth and treasure to your children or your church, who, uses it to build up society. And then you combine that with a low time preference system of government like monarchy, which seeks to run government like a private business, and hand its the business of government, of predation, down to his sons. Good kings get replaced by their sons. Bad kings get replaced by better kings, and really, really bad kings get replaced by Democrats. Democrats never get replaced because they're never actually in charge. It's the oligarchs who are in charge, and so the oligarchs end up replaced by a mediocre king who gets replaced by a better king.
Sometimes the Democrats think they're kings.
Yeah, I know, and oh boy, and they're kind of foolish about that. But if you had that level of underconsumption for 1,500 years, and then finally, you get to the 20th century. That's where you get industrialized warfare. Mass slaughter, and the mass slaughter campaigns that came with that. That was the left's overreaction to the right's overreaction. Basically, each time one overreaches, the other tries to overreach more, and it's a one up thing. And hopefully, this doesn't end in nuclear war.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
But yeah, and basically, but this is all based on economics. And if you see the way pent-up demand works with power, this is why you get these, cyclical overreactions. And also you see this at like the family level, at the micro scale, where like if you have a father who's like really overbearing, the children will want to be a lot more rebellious. That's their equal opposite overreaction. If you have parents who are, and of course it's not always 100%, but if you have a parent who's like a real just lay about, really lazy, anything goes, laissez-faire, you can sure you're 10 and you can have heroin, I don't mind, and anything goes, and the children there are more than likely going to have a more orderly overreaction to them. We're like, no, we need to have order and accountability and personal responsibility and lots and lots of structure. And
seems more like a sociological or a psychological thesis than a political or an economic thesis.
Well, I see it as a people because I understand that people have both a demand for order and for chaos. And again, these from the right and left, there's again, this is being a stereotype a little bit. The right really wants order, the left really wants chaos, and if you understand it, everyone is kind of a mixture of both. So it depends on how much is that of each is being supplied, and is that meeting the demand, yes or no? And because again, people have these demand, their values are all subjective. So maybe that's why there tends to be a lot of mixture in the middle, is that they might value different values of each. And so if you're I don't want to hold you too much longer because I know I'm doing most of the speaking here.
You're good.
Yeah, but basically this, something where I see with agorism is that, they have like a very under reach of power because they're making so much of this. And this kind of dovetails a little bit with the fifth law as well, because you guys are creating so much wealth on the outside of this. But I view that as a right-wing characteristic. You're creating wealth is hierarchy, and, the hierarchy grows and grows and grows, to the point where, okay, the state said, well, it might be nice if I got in on that. And, maybe if maybe you guys should come sell drugs for the CIA instead of, yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that happens too frequently.
I think so. And you see, but like these overreaches, or like you mentioned earlier with Colorado, because, they're like, we should probably get in on that and legalize that. This is where you can see that, they actually have an incentive, on both the third law and the sixth law to go in on that and try to have a different kind of overreach. And with California, unfortunately, that really was an overreach because they managed to still keep a black market there because, they really, really overreached, and way too much regulation, way too much taxation. And so now you still have a whole bunch of, agorists and black market dealers for marijuana, very thriving black market in California, because the white market is not profitable, so to speak, or there's not quite it's too expensive for consumers, and they prefer.
You can sort of look at any sort of distorted, any market that or economic sector that the state distorts. You can sort of like look at it in that light.
Mm-hmm. And basically, and it always demands an equal. It demands an equal and opposite overreaction. It doesn't necessarily supply it. So, but if it doesn't supply it, that demand just gets pent up, and eventually it will.
See, the way I look at it is when they monopolize a good or a service, and then they provide that good or service in an inefficient manner, then that creates a demand for some agorist like me who says, you know what, I'll slip in here and I can undermine you guys. And that's sort of, if we continue like that, we can grow this counter-economic structure until bigger and bigger and bigger, until finally we have sort of what I call the coup de grace of the Agora, which is really just a private defense agency to actually sort of compete directly with the state's defense agencies. And then we could sort of provide people with some degree of protection from the state's parasitism. That's when we sort of
basically you're
upset the apple cart.
Yeah, you're trying to become the supplier of aggression against the state. That's basically what you're saying. Is that
or defense or defense. See, whereas they claim to be providing defense, which they aren't. If they monopolize the defense service industry, and they do a very piss poor job of providing for it. Our goal is to hopefully come in and say, hey, we can provide this service at a much more efficient manner for a much lower cost. And we think that over time, just vis-a-vis economic incentives alone, people will be more inclined to do business with us and less inclined to do business with them. That's why I think it's so important what people like Dale Brown are doing with the Detroit Threat Management Project and all these different alternatives to state policing. Not all of them are going to work, but I'm certainly open to experimentation at this point.
I think so too. And I think that's the, understanding that, everything here about power is based on economic incentives, informs you about how that's going to work out and in what order. Yeah, it's the how and the why. And I feel like this discussion has been very neglected. And
sure.
And libertarianism. And once you understand it, it's like, okay, it starts to really make sense, and you can really start to work out these solutions like agorism, and you can better inform yourself about how.
Have you read Saifuddin Amis's book, The Bitcoin Standard?
No, I have not yet, but I've heard many great things about it, and I do own crypto.
So the great things you've heard about it are all bullshit, right?
Really?
The book is his take on Bitcoin is just awful. Everything the guy says about Bitcoin, you can just throw out the window. But in the beginning of the book, he has this really brilliant, sort of economic history where he goes through economic history through the lens of time preference, and it really reminds me of a lot of things that you're saying. You should read the book just for that, but don't all the things he says about Bitcoin, just forget about it. But read it for the economic history. It's pretty good in that regard.
Okay,
definitely relates to everything that we've been talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's among the most important lessons is that they will defer gratification sometimes, and people have this behavior where they always want more, and maybe they want more later, maybe they want more now. And
well, I think Saifuddin's point, I think he gets this from Hop, and I agree with both of them, is that you can sort of view. Again, I hesitate to use a paradigm to view history through, because I think that it is sort of deterministic and you have to take into account all these different things. But if you look at history through the lens of time preference alone, everything sort of makes a lot of sense. It sort of really becomes crystal clear.
It really does. I mean, if you look at I usually say for 10,500 years of human history, basically, capitalism is possible. At 12,900 BC, when Earth warms up just enough that agriculture is possible, because you can't have really division of labor or anything like that on any real scale beyond division of labor beyond hunter gatherer. Those are your two divisions, and warrior. And
as a Hoppian, as somebody who likes Hop, I would say that I think property rights are sort of natural and inherent. And they obviously it comes through, mixing your labor with natural resources and stuff like that. But, as I think it's been Armani or Pete Quinones who say that you only have the rights that you're able to defend. And I think that's sort of true. So I think that's sort of
Yeah.
I think it's sort of consistent with what you're saying.
Yeah, we're locked into reality. They're not a theoretical world. And if you can own private property, but you can't really do anything with it, then you don't really own it, so to speak. And if the Earth is 20 degrees colder and agriculture is impossible, it's like you can't have a large population, you can't have division of labor, you can't bring costs down enough to actually, have economies of scale or anything like that makes human civilization work. And then on top of that, if you have 10,500 years of basically barbarianism, where we got basically nowhere as a species, and we managed to master bronze, stone, and iron in 10,500 years. And we got to the point in Rome where we're brushing our teeth with urine because it has ammonia in it, which is a bleaching agent. And literally they made toothpaste out of urine. And it wasn't just any person's urine. You really wanted a rich person's urine, because that was basically, when you call a toilet a Vespasian, that was based off Emperor Vespasian, who turned a urine into a tax. You actually got to pay your taxes in urine. God, what I wish I could say, hey, IRS, hey, I got my taxes for you right here.
Well, actually, it's funny you guys say that, because there is actually now a machine that you can shit into that will turn your shit into Ethereum somehow. It's like, yeah, it's really interesting. But Google that, because I don't know all the details on it. But
God, you guys have thought of everything.
It's just I didn't think about that. Some weird person smarter than I did, probably Vitalik or something. But.
Yeah, yeah, Vitalik Buterin, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, so basically 10,500 years of, we had really bad states and really bad religions, which were basically high costs, and they didn't tell us to defer gratification. And then we get that around like 500-ish AD, where we get both monarchy and Christianity at the same time due to the collapse of the Roman Empire. And and then 1,500 years later, we're talking on on the internet. And that's the deferral of gratification. Wealth compounds over time, creates new hierarchies, creates new technologies. New things become feasible, new things become cheaper, and there you go. That's deferral of gratification. And when you understand the idea of time preference, this is what leads to that. So if you're doing the opposite behaviors that kind of lead us back towards that barbarianism that we barely managed to get away from, let's stop doing that. Let's not do that.
And that's what the whole sort of slide of cultural degeneracy that we're seeing today sort of falls back to. It's sort of the artificially high time preference that has been foisted upon us by the banksters. This is another reason that I tell everybody to become your own bank, because once you make that switch into using sound commodity money, automatically your whole life, people don't understand that your whole life changes, and there's a whole host of benefits that flow from having a higher or a lower time preference. You have a much more stable lifestyle. You're less likely to engage in risky behavior. You're more likely to plan for the future. You're going to save capital to maybe start a business or invest later on. So making that switch alone to becoming your own bank is one of the most important things any Agorist can do.
I think it's also, for your own wealth, power, and influence. I do really like Jason Stapleton, although I understand you guys are a little bit different. But his
I'm on board. I'm on board with almost everything he says.
Yeah, but if you want to really accumulate wealth, well, you should look into decentralized finance or DeFi, because you can earn a very nice savings rate. They have 4, 5, 6% savings rates. Where are like interest on on your savings in those DeFi banks, as opposed to the
some have even higher.
Yeah, and
I believe the BlockFi savings account, it's a very high minimum balance you have to hold, but if you do, you can get up to like 8 or 9% interest, like compounded monthly or something crazy like that. I don't know all the details, but DeFi is huge. DeFi is another aspect of becoming your own bank. In fact, I'm going to be teaching a class, just a little quick plug. I'm going to be teaching a class for Thaddeus Russell's Renegade University School of Agorism on how to use cryptocurrency in your everyday life. And I think one class we're going to do all on sort of like DeFi and smart contracts and tokenization and all that wonderful stuff.
Oh, I might sign up for that. Yeah, I want to know all about DeFi, because I see this as like the wave of the future. That you're telling me as a finance guy or a money manager, like I can put my money into the stock market with tons of risk and maybe earn like 7 or 10% compounded every year, and that's with a ton of downside risk. Or I can put it into a bond or a T-bill, which gets me like 0% interest. Like, why would I want to do that? Or I can get like 7 to 9%, or compounded
Right.
every year
Or
in DeFi. It's like, I'm going to put my money there. That's because that's just rewarding me for it.
quick example, rather than, I know we're sort of going off topic here, and I think you want to wrap up, but I think like rather than, one example of this would be like, if you, rather than using a CD from some centralized legacy banking institution that's funded through coercive taxation, well, you could go out and use some Hex, and Hex is a great coin that does the exact same thing. It's a decentralized CD, and it's Ethereum tokens. So the higher Ethereum goes, the higher your initial investment goes, and of course the higher Hex goes, the higher your investment goes. So people are getting rich off of DeFi as we speak, and I think you don't want to miss out on that.
I mean, it's a $2 trillion market right now for all of crypto, and it really should be valued somewhere around 200 trillion, because
it will be soon.
I think that's where it's going, and that's why I'm like all in on crypto. I do own Ethereum, and I think that's it's a much higher return on investment that's coming. With Ethereum particularly, just everything looks like it's on the upside for Ethereum. And I mean, if you plot, have you heard of Metcalfe's law?
No.
Basically, it's how you value a telecommunications network, which is basically what these blockchains are. Is they're large networks. And so, it turns out, the number of wallets, or it's basically their active daily users, is what it really is, as how valuable the coin is. And if you plot the price on how many wallets do they have at any given time, don't worry about the time, but it's just how much wallets do they have. What was the price at this number of wallets? Then the Ethereum and Bitcoin charts, they basically are identical, and it's because of this Metcalfe's law for telecommunications. This is why like a Facebook is or Twitter, like the more users they have, active daily users, the more valuable their network is. And if you think of like the US dollar, the dollar gets more valuable the more number of users it has, and because it is a network too, and it has the same exact effect on it. But at the same time, we don't want the dollar. Stay away from that.
We could do a whole episode just on Bitcoin and its network effects, and Ethereum and the different altcoins and stuff like that. So
this thing's a wave of the future. And again, when you're creating stuff like this, that really is predation against the state. That new wealth that they can't control is predation against the state. And
again, that's why I tell people sort of like the carpenter has his hammer and the plumber has the wrench, while the Agorist has the blockchain, and it's the best tool in our tool set for us to use against them.
I think so. I think that's a good place to end it. That we've talked quite a lot about how we're going to use archotropism and its incentives to predate against the state. And Sal, any plugs?
Anti-politics. Check it out. It's a collection of Agorist essays that I put together. Lily Forrester she wrote the foreword, and I think it came out really well. I think you guys will like it, especially if you like anarchist and libertarian theory. Check it out. Podcast is the Agora. The blog is newlibertarian.io. And of course, 3D Printer Go Burr for 3D printers and supplies, and Agora threads for Agorist clothing and apparel and household items and merchandise and stuff like that. Of course, crypto is accepted and preferred, so check that thing out.
Y'all, please, like and subscribe to the video. Please, purchase, from Sal. Thank him for being here. We always appreciate that. Look out at Paloma Verde CBD promo code popular. Do not use the fake promo codes. Again, you don't want just still Hillary Clinton urine shipped to you. Don't want that. No. And if you like what I have to say, again, you can have your questions answered in the show like we did here that's at Subscribestar /popular-liberty. And there's a $2 level there for the articles where I write about archotropism and its incentives in long form essays. I wrote about the anti-tax and its long form essay. There's a long form essay there too. And you can also, at $7, you can join in and be part of my supporting listeners and start getting some of your questions answered. Thank you. Y'all have a great day. Sal, thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Here's the